In late 2018, not far from Milford, Texas, a company called Visive Technologies finished erecting an unusual tower. With its grid-like supports and a hemispheric top, it looks like the famous Nikola Tesla Tower. However, they share something more than outward similarities. In partnership with Baylor University, with the help of the tower, the company is attempting to create an electrical grid without wires, poles, or substations. It can help provide electricity to almost 1.5 billion people who have no infrastructure to install it. The scientists' developments are based on xenic waves, which are 3 times faster than Bluetooth. And unlike other existing types of energy transmission, they aren't susceptible to solar bursts, lightning, or electromagnetic impulses. Nonetheless, Nikola Tesla was ready to create a wireless electrical grid 120 years ago. But not all of his inventions were that harmless. Moreover, some of Tesla's creations could even bring the end of the world closer. Throughout his life, Nikola Tesla patented over 300 inventions in 26 countries of the world. And while the number of his unpatented inventions is close to 1,000, nobody knows the exact figure. His revolutionary ideas were so far ahead of their time that many of them seem like science fiction. Back in 1926, Collier's magazine published a shocking interview with the genius inventor. Tesla predicted the world would soon become a big brain. People would communicate instantly, no matter how far away from each other, and the devices to do this would go into a jacket pocket. He virtually predicted the rise of the internet, mobile phones, and Wi-Fi technologies. Besides, the scientist was sure all railroads would be electrified and home management would be made automatic. However, Tesla also predicted things that seem incredible even today. He speculated about flying cars and parking towers as usual things. However, to develop these, it took humanity almost 100 years. Only in the 21st century, the first news about work on such cars started to come out. In 2022, a California-based startup, Aleph Aeronautics, announced the development of the Aleph Model A, a flying car prototype with an electric power unit. Using 8 propellers, the battery-powered car takes off vertically. It's equipped with an autopilot for avoiding obstacles and a giant parachute in case of a breakdown. The automobile's speed margin is over 300 kilometers on the ground and almost 180 kilometers in the air. It is successfully undergoing tests, but the company won't launch mass production and shipping until 2025. But when you hear about Tesla's speculation about photography, you immediately forget about the flying cars. In his times, this area was only beginning to develop. For example, Kodak cameras became available to the public in 1988, but Tesla was obsessed with a pioneering type of photography that could take pictures of the human mind. In the early 1930s, he announced he was going to photograph thoughts. From 1893, he had been conducting research that convinced him that a particular mental image must reflexively produce an image on the retina that can be read with a specific machine. Tesla called it an artificial retina. Widespread use of radio waves in the late 19th century inspired him to create a thought apparatus. He believed that human brain waves could spread through special transmitters the same way sound waves distribute through the telephone. It sounds quite reasonable, but researchers are still trying to find a way to implement this concept. In 2023, a team of neurobiologists from the USA, Singapore, and Hong Kong taught artificial intelligence to decipher thoughts through scanning the brain. During the experiment, volunteers were lying in the MRT scanner looking at pictures. The scientists scanned their brains, observing changes in their bloodstreams. The experiment showed that artificial intelligence could generate images from the participants' brains that matched the source photographs by 84%. Perhaps the scientists have somewhat approached the creation of a thought machine. However, not all of Tesla's ideas just looked fantastic and appeared harmless. Some of them were so wild that scientists wouldn't even risk implementing them. In 1889, he began studying high-frequency and high-voltage electric currents. Tesla found that at the frequency of over 700 hertz, electricity flows on the body's surface, causing no harm to its tissues. The experiments led the inventor to an unusual disinfection method. The current's effect on the skin showed that it's possible to cure millet rash, clear pores, and kill germs in this way. This method was called cold fire. Tesla suggested using it instead of soap and water. He was convinced that electricity was not only several-fold more efficient than traditional hygiene methods, but also gave a considerable energy boost. Standing on a metal sheet, a person was exposed to a 2.5 million-volt alternating current. From outside, it looked as if they were covered with fire. The invention never received funding, but the method is widely used in modern electrotherapy. However, not all of Tesla's creations were intended for peaceful purposes. In 1898, at the electrical exhibition held at Madison Square Garden, the engineer presented a remote-control submarine to the public. The tiny vessel, a little over a meter long and 1 meter high, with small antennas on board, moved around the pool by itself. Inside, it was rigged with a battery, radio modules, and electric motors. Apart from the submarine, the inventor constructed a device to control the boat. Tesla himself called the remote control concept teleautomatics. The process seemed magical to the spectators. In the following interview, Tesla claimed that such submarines, loaded with torpedoes, could be launched from safety, secretly float through mined waters, attack an enemy, and come back. The inventor was convinced that similar machines could provide a critical advantage in a battle and save people's lives, but the military concluded that controlling a vessel like this required actions that would be difficult to perform in combat. Nevertheless, some drones are now a reality. For instance, in May of 2023, Nauticus Robotics demonstrated the capabilities of the Defender, its revolutionary underwater drone. Its primary feature is its software toolkit, which supports artificial intelligence. Thanks to it, it can track and neutralize explosives at a great distance. Electricity-driven Zeppelins were another of Tesla's revolutionary inventions. He argued that they could transfer passengers from New York to London in just 3 hours at an altitude of over 13 kilometers above the ground. The inventor thought such machines would receive energy they needed from the atmosphere without having to land to refuel. He was also sure they could be uncrewed and land wherever the passenger required. Unfortunately, not a single company agreed to provide a loan for such a revolutionary idea. But almost 100 years later, humanity's easily conquering the sky. And it's hard to surprise anyone with drones in the arms industry. In early 2012, they started mass production of the Black Hornet Nano, the smallest unmanned vehicle in the world. Despite tiny dimensions, 10 by 2.5 centimeters, they managed to integrate a considerable number of sensors, 2 optical cameras, and a thermal imager in it. It's virtually impossible to hear or ground it, which makes it indispensable for surveillance operations. Nikola Tesla also worked in the defense industry sector. In 1917, the scientist offered a submarine tracking device. He proved it was possible to trace their locations with electromagnetic waves. Back then, nobody took his idea seriously, but as early as in the 1930s, the first radars emerged. which are systems that help locate on-ground, underwater, and air objects, as well as determine their proximity and speed. The absolute majority of Tesla's inventions remained on paper during his lifetime, but maybe it's for the better, as there's plenty of evidence the scientist worked on secret deadly weapons. Many myths have always shrouded Tesla and his inventions. One of them is related to a disaster for which scientists haven't yet found an explanation. On June 13, 1908, a tremendous explosion shook a remote area in Siberia. It's been estimated that the power was comparable to over 20 megatons of TNT. Witnesses reported that at first a second sun appeared in the sky, flying at a terrifying speed until it exploded 17 kilometers from Earth. The blast wave circled Earth and was registered by all meteorological observatories worldwide. The explosion from the fireball of 100 meters in diameter devastated 2,000 kilometers of taiga and uprooted 80 million trees. They could hear the explosion 800 kilometers from its epicenter, while witnesses who were 60 kilometers from it recalled the ground shook under their feet. Deafening rolls of thunder rumbled around them, and the sky was full of lightning bolts. The energy outbreak was 185 times higher than that of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Seismic tremors were felt even in the UK. In the following few days, bright silvery clouds were observed in the sky across the northern hemisphere, and the night was as bright as day. Today, there are over 100 versions of what could possibly have produced the explosion. One of them is related to Nikola Tesla's name. The rumors say that similar effects were in place when the renowned inventor conducted experiments in his Wardenclyffe Tower, creating discharges that made the sky glare. The inventor was obsessed with the idea of wireless electricity transmission all his life. He began planning his tower in 1898. 3 years later, its construction began. Because the funding stopped, it was never finished. But there's a hypothesis he went on experimenting with it up until 1908, and they said it wasn't only designed for peaceful purposes. In his interview with the New York Times, Tesla allegedly argued his experimental wireless electricity transmission units could destroy any area on Earth, turning it into a lifeless desert. The Tunguska event probably happened without Tesla's interference, as otherwise the military would have definitely investigated it right away. Or perhaps this is exactly why it happened, since there's another legend according to which the scientist's latest works were used in the so-called Philadelphia experiment. On October 28, 1943, the USS eldddir, stationed at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, supposedly disappeared all of a sudden. Almost immediately after that, it was seen in Norfolk, that is, almost 360 kilometers away. And another 30 minutes later, it reappeared at the starting point. But it only had to become invisible for military detection systems. As a result, the unexpected teleportation killed 160 crew members. 27 sailors literally became a part of the ship as if they were embedded in its structures. 13 died from radiation and electrocution, while the rest simply vanished. Because the results were so terrible, the teleportation experiment was never repeated, and today, there's no evidence it actually happened. The only source of information on the Philadelphia experiment was an ex-merchant mariner, Carl M. Allen, who claimed to have witnessed it. But there's also a hypothesis that from 1936 to 1942, Nikola Tesla was in charge of Project Rainbow, a predecessor of stealth, the modern low observable technology. The program included the development of geometric forms and radiation-absorbent materials that could decrease a machine's radar cross-section. The project was top secret and was supposed to tip the balance in the Second World War. The experiment involving a ship's disappearance required the creation of an electromagnetic bubble, which would alter the electromagnetic field around an object, taking radars off it. Tesla rigged the destroyer with his famous coils, and on board, a secret unit created a powerful electromagnetic field around the ship. A special generator made it possible to control the disappearance. The witnesses to the experiment claimed they'd observed green glowing and the ship's trace on the water after it became invisible. The scientist envisaged casualties and put off the experiment, repeatedly redesigning the equipment until he finally abandoned it and quit the project. But they conducted the experiment after his death. Both the Tunguska event and the Philadelphia experiment are surrounded by lots of myths, making it quite hard to prove Tesla's involvement in them. However, we have genuine evidence that the scientist worked on developing various sorts of deadly weapons. Nikola Tesla made over 1,000 inventions, and almost all of them could be used not only for peaceful purposes, but also to increase any nation's military capacity. Sometimes his inventions were so dangerous that the experiments with them could have killed the creator himself. In 1893, Tesla patented his electromechanical oscillator. The device itself weighed only about a kilogram, but the inventor could tune it to such frequency that even the slightest vibration could cause massive resonance in surrounding objects. Given a sufficient amount of tiny oscillations, it could even shake and destroy a large structure. Tesla continued upgrading it until 1898. However, not a single design survived. According to one version of events, working at his New York lab on Houston Street one day, Tesla heard an indistinct low-frequency hum from the outside. The building's walls trembled and window panes shattered. The effect quickly spread to neighboring streets, and terrified people began running out of their homes. The inventor was sure that by accelerating the device, he could even split the earth in half. When he realized the danger of his invention, he smashed the generator with a hammer and kept quiet about the reasons behind the earthquake for a long time. However, Tesla didn't stop working on deadly weapons. From artificial earthquakes, he went to human-made tsunamis. And as early as in 1907, the New York World reported on another of Tesla's military inventions. He offered to use a remote control to detonate explosives in the open sea. It was supposed to cause massive tidal waves that could easily crash whole enemy fleets. These artificial tsunamis were aimed at making warships absolutely useless. Tesla was also sure you could control the weather on the planet. He believed that by using certain radio waves, you could manipulate Earth's magnetic field in the ionosphere, controlling wind and, consequently, the weather. Tesla received many patents for those ideas and ostensibly proved that what he was talking about actually worked. The idea of controlling the weather might seem pretty harmless, but in the hands of the military, such an invention could become a weapon of mass destruction. Many people think it's already being actively developed. It's simply done in secret because in 1977, a UN convention ruled on banning experiments in this field. Nevertheless, the HAARP array is deemed to be among probable climate weapon programs. It's an American research project launched in the spring of 1977 in Alaska. It was designed to study the polar lights and how the ionosphere interacts with the powerful electromagnetic field. But it quickly gained a reputation as a project that could control the weather in natural disasters. The theory's followers blamed the HAARP for the 2004 horrific earthquake in the Indian Ocean. Back then, the disaster killed almost 200,000 people. However, even these projects can't be considered Tesla's most dangerous weapon. On July 11, 1934, the New York Sun and the New York Times mentioned the scientist's new, highly destructive invention. Tesla claimed the world was on the verge of another world war, and the only way to avoid it was to create a powerful, destructive deterrent weapon. He called his prototype Teleforce. It was a projector for charged tungsten particles. Straying from a tube through electrostatic repulsion, they accelerated with the help of high voltage and an amplifying transmitter. By Tesla's design, the particle flux had to travel 48 times faster than the speed of sound. They didn't scatter in the air, even at a great distance. By the inventor's plan, its tip had to send energy clusters of enormous power that could ground a fleet of 10,000 enemy aircraft from over 300 kilometers away. The press called them peace rays and death rays at the same time. Tesla himself claimed that Teleforce wasn't merely an idea on paper. He said he'd been working on the cannon from 1900, and it had been ostensibly built and even tested. That same year, Tesla wrote a treatise on the weapon running on charged particle beams, the new art of projecting concentrated, non-dispersive energy through natural media. In the document, he describes his superweapon's technical details. It's currently stored at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. The inventor tried to attract the interest of the U.S. War Department, the United Kingdom, the USSR, and Yugoslavia with his machine. He even claimed there had been attempts to steal his works during the negotiations. Luckily, the funding needed to implement the death race never came up. But nobody knows how long Tesla's most dangerous inventions will remain unimplemented. In 1895, Tesla discovered that magnetic fields could significantly influence time and space, changing their very structure. Rumors even say that thanks to creating an artificial magnetic field, he even opened a window to another dimension in which he simultaneously saw the past, the present, and the future. And he probably spent his entire life working to create a machine that would enable opening such portals and even controlling time. It sounds incredible, but some of his inventions were so far ahead of their time that it suggests he might have not only created them, but also successfully used them. The inventor's entire life is shrouded in secrets, riddles, and mysteries. It just may not be the right time for them yet. What do you think? How did Nikola Tesla know so much about the future?